Hello and welcome to the Worth the Hike podcast. I'm your host B, and this is where I give you tips and tricks for exploring some of the country's most wild landscapes and scenic trails. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest and have hiked my entire life. Since the summer of 2020, I've completed 460 trails, visited 33 national parks, and hiked over 1,800 miles. Some of the more notable being Half Dome in Yosemite, Angel's Landing in Zion, and Mount Whitney in Inyo National Forest, the highest peak in the continuous United States. Today, we are taking a look at arguably the most unique set of hikes in America located in Bryce Canyon National Park. The Rim, Navajo, Queen's Garden, Wall Street, and Peekaboo trails. We'll be taking a look at when to visit, how to get there, what to expect, and my overall rating for the trail. Let's get into it. First and foremost, I'd highly recommend downloading this podcast now, as you could lose service inside the park. If you are watching this on YouTube, head on over to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Links can be found in the description below. If you're just visiting for the day, or planning an entire trip, this information could be the difference in maximizing your journey. Please also download the Google map for Bryce Canyon National Park, and all of the necessary AllTrails maps for the hikes you plan on exploring on this trip. And of course, downloading any other podcasts or music that you want to listen to on your drive or hike up. If you're not already, it would also be smart to become an AllTrails Pro member so you can keep track of your hiking stats and all the trails you've completed. It costs about $36 a year. And wherever you may be watching this, feel free to rate, like, and subscribe. I only post this content in the hopes of being able to help people that love hiking as much as I do. Every little bit of support means the world. Also, feel free to follow and reach out on the socials. My Instagram is @WorthTheHikePod. And you can also reach me at my email, worththehikepod@gmail.com. Thank you to everyone that has taken the time to watch my work on summiting Half Dome in Yosemite National Park, the Skyline Trail in Mount Rainier National Park, and the Mist Trail also in Yosemite. All reviews can be found in the description below. All right, let's take a look at some quick tips before entering the park. We're taking a look at the last stop. Rudy's General Store has everything that you could possibly need. Located only 2 miles outside the park, also a Bryce Canyon Shuttle stop. A must for any wanted or forgotten supplies such as gear, firewood, clothing, food, and whatever beverage you might have on your mind. I would still wait until you get to the Bryce Canyon Visitor Center before purchasing souvenirs. It is one of the better visitor centers in the national park system with a variety of awesome goods. The North Campground General Store is amazing for quick food and beverages, especially if you're staying at the campground or finishing a hike. It is located right next to Sunrise Point along the Rim Trail. Their selection is limited to that of a gas station, but you can't beat an ice cream after a long hike. For quick food, there's a Subway near the roundabout leading to Bryce Canyon City. This spot has saved me multiple times. Never thought Subway could taste so good until you're stranded in the middle of nowhere. In the park, there is also a restaurant located at Bryce Lodge, open for breakfast 7 a.m. to 10 a.m., lunch 11:30 to 3 p.m., and dinner 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. No reservations are required, and casual clothing is acceptable. Gas and electric. There's a gas station available 3 minutes from the entrance to the park in Bryce Canyon City at the Sinclair gas station. There are multiple EV charging ports in Bryce Canyon City. There's some at the Best Western Plus, Ruby's Inn RV Park, and Bryce View Lodge. There's also a charger available inside the park at Bryce Canyon Lodge. Cell service. You will be able to find pockets of cell service within the park, but it can be a little unreliable at times for downloading, so I would still recommend downloading everything Google Maps, AllTrails, music, and podcasts in advance, but you should be able to find service above the rim and in the campgrounds. Weather. Weather can be a little tricky because the entire park is sneakily at a very high elevation. You'll find yourself at 8,000 feet at the most casual of stops. Thunderstorms frequent the area even on the nicest of days. Snow is a guarantee during the winter months, November to March. The park sees 100 inches of snow annually. Checking the forecast ahead of time is a must for both accessibility and safety. May to September is the sweet spot for visiting the park. Pets. Important to remember that while pets are allowed on paved portions of the park, pets are not allowed on trails, so make sure to leave the pooches at home if you will be hiking. Service animals are exempt. Check Bryce Canyon's website for guidelines. Timed entry permits are currently not required in Bryce Canyon National Park, so you may come and go as you please year-round. That being said, there's only one entry road to the park, so leave at your own risk, because you may have to wait in a very long line to re-enter during the summer months. If already inside the park, consider taking the shuttle into town, which is probably the most efficient route. Now let's get into some of the most gorgeous hiking in the state of Utah, and arguably some of the most popular trails in the United States. The majority of the noteworthy hikes in Bryce Canyon National Park are bunched into a relatively small window, a 20-mile series of amphitheaters that can be hiked down and driven by. The trails we will be taking a look at are the Rim Trail, the most popular in the entire park with 4 main viewing points, the Queen's Garden Trail, a popular loop with rock features resembling a historic figure, the Navajo Loop, a legendary and iconic hike with some of the most jaw-dropping views you will ever see, the Peekaboo Loop, my personal favorite hike that gives you the best opportunity to hike amongst the hoodoos and experience what Bryce Canyon is truly all about. And finally, the Fairyland Loop, a somewhat forgotten area of the park that presents majesty and spectacular views without the crowds. Okay, starting off with the Rim Trail. It comes in at 10.7 miles round trip with 1,600 feet of elevation gain. This is by far the most popular area of the park. Millions of people visit annually and only visit the points along this route, most doing it by car. In order of viewpoints along the trail, you will have Sunrise Point, Sunset Point, Inspiration Point, and Bryce Point. If you are staying at the North Campground, the trail is only a quick walk away. Important to note that dogs are not allowed on this hike. The trail truly begins at the same trailhead as the Fairyland Loop, but most people start at the first major viewing point, Sunrise Point. This is also where you can find the trailhead for the Queen's Garden Trail, which we will talk about more later on. The viewpoints as you walk along become increasingly more scenic. Contrary to its namesake, I would actually recommend a different point to view the sunrise, but we can discuss that more later as well. Parking is readily available at this location, but will fill up extremely quick in the morning hours as people wait for the sunrise. Walking from Sunrise Point to Sunset Point is just under a mile on a flat paved surface. When you arrive at the viewing area, there's quite a bit to break down. Most likely, the first thing you will notice is the iconic rock formation known as the Hammer of Thor, arguably the most recognizable hoodoo in the park. For those of you who might be asking, a hoodoo is what Bryce Canyon is famous for. They are freestanding rock towers seen around the park. It is also important to know that this is where you will find the trailhead for the famous Navajo Loop trail as well, which we will discuss in a minute. Similar to Sunrise Point, there is a decent allotment of parking here, but it can quickly fill up on weekends and during the summer months. You can also find restrooms and water refill stations here as well. As you continue along the rim trail, the path will turn to dirt, and you will begin to see increased elevation, roughly 250 feet over 3/4 of a mile before you reach the third viewpoint, Inspiration Point. It's important to remember that if you are driving to this location that there are 2 sections of Inspiration Point, a lower and upper Inspiration Point. Please do yourself a favor and make your way to the upper point if you are physically able, as you will be rewarded with spectacular views of hoodoos in almost every direction. This is the point where I truly fell in love with the park. Make sure to take a moment to take it all in and appreciate what a special place this is. There's also a bathroom available here at the parking lot. Just like the others, there's plenty of spots to park, but the spots will fill up quickly during peak hours. The final viewing area along the rim trail is aptly named Bryce Point. This, without a doubt, is the best view in the entire park, and a place where I would highly recommend showing up early as it does get crowded quickly. If you are hiking from Inspiration Point, it'll be around 1.5 miles and an elevation gain of 500 feet through a series of rolling hills. There are a number of wonderful points along this section of the trail where you can find some privacy and enjoy the view for an extended period of time. The viewing platform opens up, and you can essentially see the entire amphitheater that you just traversed. If you look carefully, you can spot all 3 of the previous points out in the distance. I can't emphasize this enough. Please stay here as long as you can. Truly one of the greatest gems in the entire national park system. As I previously said, Sunrise Point would not be my choice for watching the sunrise. I would choose Bryce or Inspiration, as you will see what makes mornings so special here. The orange light illuminating the hundreds of hoodoos, which can be found nowhere else on Earth. The parking lot here is extremely small. It can barely fit 24 cars. If you are not hiking, I would highly recommend taking the bus during rush hour. This will also be the trailhead for the next hike we will be discussing, the Peekaboo Loop. Now that we have covered the rim trail, it is time to discuss the series of trails that explore the hoodoos from down below. The 3 main trails are the Peekaboo Loop, Navajo Loop, and the Queen's Garden Trail. All 3 connect and start at varying points along the rim trail. I'll go ahead and walk you through each individual trail and then give you my master day hike connecting all 3 along with the rim trail. As I just said, the Peekaboo Loop starts at Bryce Point. In total, it is 5.2 miles round trip with 1,500 feet of elevation gain and takes about 3 hours to complete. Important to remember that most of the elevation will be at the end of your hike, as you will be descending nearly 1,000 feet to the floor of the amphitheater. There are some tremendous views as you descend. Many of the hoodoos you will see on the way down are only visible along this trail. You will pass through windows carved out of the sedimentary rock, revealing valleys of hoodoos. As you start to get close to the bottom, you'll have to decide to go left or right. Left will treat you to an area known as the Wall of Windows, a beautiful area that rarely gets explored as most folks head right. A great place for quiet and serenity. You will notice a surprising amount of greenery as you make your way around the loop. Once you make it halfway along the loop, you will start to see signs and a trail to connect you to the Navajo Loop, which we will discuss in a minute. As you continue along, you will notice the landscape opening up and views can be seen for miles. You'll run into Peekaboo Loop Arch, a massive rock fixture that you will go through along the trail. A unique experience that I've only seen at Bryce Canyon National Park. As you pass by the arch, you will notice a Peekaboo Hike the Hoodoos sign. Each of the major trails will have their own unique sign, with a medallion on it that you can either take a photo with or use a stencil to get a copy of. When you collect all of the signs throughout the park, you'll be rewarded with a I Hike the Hoodoos reward, a sticker or a pin depending on what they have available. A very fun activity to keep your young ones engaged if you were on a family excursion. Finally, completing the loop, you will now have to gain all of that elevation back. And on hot summer days, this can be a bit of a grueling task. So please make sure to bring plenty of water, as there is none available at the floor of the amphitheater. Moving back to Sunset Point, we will be taking a look at the Navajo Loop, a rather short hike all in all, but an incredibly memorable one. Measuring 1.5 miles round trip with 500 feet of elevation gain and taking approximately an hour to complete. Unlike the Peekaboo Loop, in which going either direction would be fine, I'd recommend going down the left side of the loop first, where you'll be able to get up close and personal with the Hammer of Thor, the most iconic hoodoo within the park, with an incredible backdrop. It's hard to explain how large it is until you've seen it up close in person. As you continue on your way down, there is also a viewpoint for the two bridges, a pairing of arches found closely nestled together. As you make it to the bottom of the trail, you'll run into another benchmark, this time for the Navajo Trail. Make sure to grab your photo or stencil so you can grab your reward at the visitor center. You'll see a sign for Wall Street to your right. Follow this and prepare yourself for what's in store. A series of switchbacks within a slot canyon with towering rows of hoodoos on either side. It feels like you're being taken to an entirely different planet. The reason that we went this route was so you could take in the Wall Street in chunks. As you continue along, you will realize the vastness and beauty of this area, as it increases as you go along. Much like the various points along the rim trail, you want to experience them in progression of increasingly more spectacular. Wall Street and Bryce Point would be my two must-sees within the park, if you are working with extremely limited time. Another trail that is often combined with the Navajo Loop is the Queen's Garden Trail. If you continue along the path, you will run directly into the Navajo benchmark. If you choose to do this as a standalone hike, it's roughly 1.6 miles round trip, and you'll gain about 400 feet of elevation, and can be completed in under an hour. The trailhead begins at Sunrise Point, and as you make your way down, you will hike through a series of tunnels along the path. Be aware that these are popular photo spots and can lead to congestion along the way, after which you will reach the iconic rock formation for which the trail gets its namesake, known as Queen Victoria. The name comes from an uncanny resemblance to the statue of Queen Victoria in London, England. A very unique spot, and a stop you should make along your journey to Bryce Canyon. Don't forget to grab your stencil or photo with the Queen's Garden benchmark to complete your Hike the Hoodoos challenge, so you can collect your prize at the visitor center. Now that we have gone through the various hikes, I'd like to give you the ultimate day hike, and please remember that this route is not for everyone and should be reserved for those that are physically prepared. If you only have one day to visit Bryce Canyon, this is the route I would take. Starting at Sunrise Point, first thing in the morning, and beginning your path along the rim trail, hitting Sunset Point, Inspiration Point, and Bryce Point along the way, you will then continue your way down on the Peekaboo Loop, heading towards the bottom of the amphitheater. Make sure to take a right at the fork so you can grab the Peekaboo benchmark sign. Continuing onward, you'll head straight towards the Navajo Trail. When you arrive, remember to head up Wall Street and head down the Hammer of Thor route, finishing at the Navajo benchmark sign. Finally, you will continue up the Queen's Garden Trail, visiting our friend Queen Victoria, grabbing your last sign, the Queen's Garden benchmark, and completing your hike at the same point from which you started. All in, you're looking at a full day of hiking with a 9 to 10 mile loop with roughly 2,000 feet of elevation gain. This is the hike to experience Bryce Canyon and should be a goal for anyone looking to experience the park to its absolute fullest. There is one more trail that I left out that you should take a look at if you have time, and that is the Fairyland Loop. The trailhead is actually the starting point for the Rim Trail and is a barely visited area when compared to the trails we have previously discussed. In total, you're looking at 8 miles round trip and roughly 1,500 feet of elevation gain. There are some really nice views along this trail and some interesting landmarks like the Tower Bridge rock formation. But at the end of the day, this is the best way to see some hoodoos in nature while also experiencing some peace and quiet. After all of that, I'd like to give an overall rating for the trail. I base it on 4 different categories: the highlights, the uniqueness, the accessibility, and the drawbacks, each of which I will give a score out of 25. First, the highlights. From all the spectacular viewpoints illustrating colors and rock formations found nowhere else on Earth, rolling landscapes that seem to never end with countless number of hoodoos, each larger and more unique than the next, all of the world-class hikes from the Navajo Trail revealing world-renowned spectacles like the Hammer of Thor and the awe-inspiring Wall Street, to the Queen's Garden Trail with Queen Victoria herself standing guard. While this might not be the most adventurous experience you could have, this might be one of the most beautiful. This, without a doubt, is a 25 out of 25. Next, the uniqueness. If I haven't hammered this point home enough, let me be clear. This is the only place in the world that you can experience this majesty. When you walk around the park, you hear the languages from all over the world, ranging from Europe, Asia, Africa, and South America. We as Americans are so absolutely spoiled to have this special place so readily available to us. The colors, the rock formations, the incredible beauty that will open the door for you to believe in something greater than yourself. I wish I could give this extra credit for truly being a one of a kind. So obviously, this is a 25 out of 25. Next, the accessibility. One of the coolest things about visiting national parks in Utah is the fact that you can visit all 5 Zion, Bryce Canyon, Capitol Reef, Canyonlands, and Arches in a single road trip, as they are perfectly lined up in the southern part of the state. While the airport situation isn't perfect, it is very reasonable. Las Vegas and Salt Lake City are both about a 4-hour drive away from the park, with loads of flights and car rentals available for both. The roads leading up to the park are well maintained and are easy to navigate. Additionally, the public transportation system within the park and the fact that the entire park is basically one road make it extremely easy to access during the most popular months. The one downside, I would say, is the park is very sneakily at 8,000 feet of elevation, so winter weather can strike out of nowhere and very aggressively. So visiting during the shoulder seasons can bring the risk of not being able to access the park due to excessive snow. But the park has a very well-prepared team to plow the roads when these circumstances do arrive. All in all, I would make this a 23 out of 25. Finally, the drawbacks. As with many of my videos, the problem lies with the popularity of these places, much of which is spurred by social media, some of which is unavoidable, but often you will run into folks that do not respect the incredible landscape they are visiting. Whether it's littering, playing music out of their speakers, or trying to smash and destroy the incredible rock formations that we all love so much. With Bryce Canyon seeing steady increases of visitors year over year, unfortunately, you see more of these individuals. Another drawback is the elevation. The snow can hit fast and furious in the shoulder seasons. Timing outside of the summer months can be difficult. With that being said, I would give the drawbacks as a whole a 21 out of 25. My overall rating is a 94 out of 100. You get to experience the essence of Utah in a spectacular spot unlike anywhere else on Earth. I've introduced nearly a dozen different individuals to Bryce Canyon over the years. Seeing the awe and amazement of someone experiencing the park for the very first time reminds me of what a spectacular place this is. Visually speaking, this would be my top choice in the national park system, a site that will emotionally engage you and change your entire perspective on what is possible in the natural world. This is a must visit and should be immediately added to any bucket list, no matter how old or young you might be. Now we'll take a look at some of the alternative trails in Bryce Canyon. Again, we've covered mostly everything, but there are a couple at the very end of the road if you drive through the entire park. There's the Under the Rim Trail, which is about 22 miles and 4,400 feet of elevation gain. This is a great backpacking route. There's also the Rig Spring Loop Trail, which is about 8.6 miles round trip with about 1,900 feet of elevation gain. It's important to remember though that depending on the season, water may not be available at these sites if you choose to backpack. Outside of the park, you can head on over to the Cedar Breaks National Monument, very close nearby. Also has some tremendous hoodoos just like Bryce. If you're going to do that, I would check out the Bartizan Arch Trail. It's 5 miles with 1,100 feet of elevation gain. You can also head over to one of the neighboring national parks. Zion's going to be the closest one and have some great hiking. You can check out Angel's Landing or Boy Scout Trail Lookout. Again, these are the same trail, just Angel's Landing you'll need a permit for. The Boy Scout Lookout is something you can access whenever you'd like. For Angel's Landing, it'll be about 4.3 miles round trip with 1,800 feet of elevation gain. And for the Boy Scout Lookout, it'll be 3.6 miles round trip with 1,100 feet of elevation gain. You can also check out the Narrows, which opens seasonally. The Narrows bottom-up route to Big Springs is 8.9 miles round trip with 700 feet of elevation gain. Again, I would come prepared for this one. You'll be walking through water nearly the entire time and is seasonally dependent on how strong the water current is. The later in the year that you go, the easier the hike will be. And if there's any rain in the forecast, avoid this trail at all costs, as flash flood warnings are abundant. And finally, at the eastern entrance of the park, one of my absolute favorite hikes in Zion is the observation point via the East Mesa Trail. It's only about 7 miles round trip trip with 700 feet of elevation gain. It just gives you an absolutely spectacular view of the entire park, even greater than Angel's Landing. All right, directions to Bryce Canyon National Park. Las Vegas and Salt Lake City are going to be your best options for international airports. They're both about a 4-hour drive to Bryce Canyon with plenty of cheap flights and car rental options. Both cities have relatively decent food options as well. Cedar City also has an airport if you're trying to get closer, but to be frank, there are a lot of little airports throughout southern Utah, but trying to find a flight with reliable airlines for a decent price and arriving at a decent time will be difficult. Also cannot emphasize the importance of having cheap and available car rental options in Salt Lake City and Las Vegas. It's a great area to road trip. When to visit? The best time to visit the park is during the summer months, May to September. I'd personally recommend visiting during either May or September to avoid the children out of school on summer break, but still getting the benefits of the beautiful sunny weather, usually in the 70s Fahrenheit during these months. You can visit year-round, and many people like seeing the stunning orange hoodoos contrasting with the glistening white snow. Roughly 2.5 million people visited it in 2023 and have been steadily increasing every year, a vast majority of these during the summer months, May to September. I'd recommend arriving at the park before 8 a.m. to avoid long lines. Parking at Bryce Canyon can be very limited depending on the location. Generally speaking, you find between a dozen to 4 dozen parking spots at any major attraction. If you visited Bryce Canyon before, you will know that most of your day was spent waiting for parking at popular spots, unless you arrive early in the morning or late in the afternoon. The main points of conflict are the Visitor Center, which is only 1 hour parking, all stops along the Rim Trail, Sunrise, Sunset, Inspiration, and Bryce, and all stops to the Bryce Canyon Scenic Drive, Sheep Creek, Swamp Creek, Fairview Point, Natural Bridge, Aqua Canyon, Ponderosa Point, Black Birch Canyon, and Rainbow Point. Vehicles over 23 feet are restricted from parking in a variety of spots, including the Visitor Center, Sunrise Point, Bryce Lodge, Sunset Point, Inspiration Point, Bryce Point, and Pariah View. There is additional parking across the road from the Visitor Center and tons of parking available at the Shuttle station in Bryce Canyon City. An easy way to get around is the Bryce Canyon Shuttle system. One of the most amazing features is that the shuttle actually takes you outside the park. If you're camping and need supplies, or if you found a good parking spot and don't want to give it up, this is a great option. There's also large overflow parking in Bryce Canyon City, called the Shuttle Station, for visitors who never want to drive into the park or can't and want to leave their vehicle. This is highly encouraged by park staff to reduce congestion within the park. Buses typically arrive every 15 minutes and have unlimited free access with admission to the park. There's also a Bryce Canyon shuttle tracker that will give you minute-by-minute updates on when the next shuttle will arrive. The link can be found in the description below. The shuttle runs from April to October. From May to September, it runs from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. In the months of April and October, it runs from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Check Bryce Canyon's website for the latest information. Pets are not permitted on the shuttle. The entirety of the shuttle system is about 15 stops total, and it will take about 50 minutes to complete. There's no public transportation provided that will get you south of Bryce Point in Bryce Canyon National Park. All right, now we're going to look at the various fees and passes that'll get you into Bryce Canyon National Park. First, we have the minimum single vehicle, $35, that'll get you a 7-day pass. This is the minimum that you will have to pay. You have the annual pass for Bryce Canyon, which will get you in for a full 365 days for $70. Then there's the America the Beautiful Pass, my personal favorite, and I use almost every weekend. This will give you access to all National Park Service lands. Then there's the Senior Pass for ages 62 plus. It's $80, but it's for your lifetime. The Access Pass, which is free and is for disabled individuals meeting certain criteria. Make sure to check out the National Park website for further details. And finally, the Military Pass, which is free and is for both currently serving personnel and veterans. There are a few discounts here as well. Holders of the following passes with valid ID receive a 50% discount on their camping fees. The Golden Age and Golden Access Passes, America the Beautiful Federal Lands Senior Pass, and America the Beautiful Federal Lands Access Pass. The Visitor Center. Quick note for my National Park Passport stamp collectors out there. You'll be able to grab one at the Bryce Canyon Visitor Center, open 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. during the summer months and closing at 6 p.m. during the winter months. It's a great spot for gifts and souvenirs. Keep an eye out for the Deneen coffee mugs. Bryce Canyon recently released a 100th anniversary edition, which is awesome. I always recommend visiting before hitting the trails because your hiking adventure will take longer than you think, and the shop will most likely be closed when you're finished. That being said, if you decide to participate in the I Hike the Hoodoos Challenge, this is where you will redeem your prize afterwards. This facility has a variety of services, including restrooms, drinking water, backpacking permits, first aid, ranger help desk, bookstore, park films, history, and geological information. If you don't already know, Whenever you visit a visitor center for a federally owned park, they have a stamp with the park's name and current date on it. It really makes for an awesome keepsake and only costs about $13 for the book. It's the best way to keep track of all your adventures. If you would like to take a photo with the national park signs before you reach the entrance to the park, on the road leading up to Bryce Canyon, there will be a pull-off with a parking lot where you can stop and grab a photo. There is another gift shop located at Bryce Lodge, but the visitor center has a far better variety of goods. The visitor center is also one of the shuttle stops. There's a variety of other activities you can check out at Bryce. As previously mentioned, there's the I Hike the Hoodoos challenge, where you can collect all the signs throughout the various trails and get a pin or sticker from the visitor center. There's also the North Campground Outdoor Theater, where they hold a number of seminars and educational teaching sessions. There's also a number of beautiful bike paths, all of them paved. Another popular option, which I personally saw firsthand, honestly, this might be the coolest activity within the park that's not hiking, is horseback riding. There's a number of spots that do it in town, but you can literally ride down into the hoodoos themselves via horseback. Obviously, with this being such a gorgeous hike, photography is a huge activity for this park. You will see people with cameras almost anywhere you go. Outside the parks, you can also rent ATVs and go off-roading. But again, none of these take place directly inside Bryce, just the surrounding area. You can also do a scenic drive in which you have a self-guided audio tour and can be found on anywhere that you can download audiobooks. Along the scenic drive, the stops you're going to want to check out are Sheep Creek/Swamp Creek, Fairview Point, Natural Bridge, Aqua Canyon, Ponderosa Point, Black Birch Canyon, and Rainbow Point. A couple activities for the winter you might consider. Snowshoeing is huge here. It's very common, plenty of places to rent from, and cross-country skiing. Dark sky parks. When you start visiting some of these more isolated parks, some of them have a special designation as an international dark sky park. Is a public or private land of substantial size, at least 700 square kilometers or about 173,000 acres, possessing an exceptional or distinguished quality of starry nights and nocturnal environment. And that is specifically protected for its scientific, natural, educational, cultural heritage, and or public enjoyment. Bryce Canyon just happens to be one of these parks and should be definitely enjoyed as so. You may be able to see the Milky Way over the hoodoos at night. When looking to visit other parks, please check to see if they are designated dark sky parks. There are 131 in the United States alone. Southern Utah and northern Arizona are famous for their amazing road tripping routes. This is due to the open roads and the plethora of world-renowned sites found in both states. I've personally driven this area close to a dozen times and have seen some of the most amazing one-of-a-kind natural landscapes and landmarks not found anywhere else on Earth. This is a few of the ones I'd recommend checking out if you're in the area. Going from east to west, Zion National Park, Cedar Breaks National Monument, Capitol Reef National Park, Page, Arizona, Antelope Canyon, Horseshoe Bend, Rainbow Bridge National Monument, Lake Powell, Monument Valley, Arches National Park, Canyonlands National Park, Dead Horse Point State Park, Goblin Valley State Park, Natural Bridges National Monument, and Four Corners. Camping. There are two campgrounds in Bryce Canyon, North Campground and Sunset Campground. Both campgrounds are awesome and very well maintained. Located within walking distance to the visitor center, so it's very easy to catch the shuttle to visit other attractions around the park without having to drive. Sunset Campground is only operational from May to October and can be booked on recreation.gov or by first come first serve. North Campground is open year-round, but is only available for reservation on recreation.gov from May to October, and the rest of the year is first come first serve. Tent campsites and RV campsites are about $30 a night. Holders of the Senior Pass or Access Pass, as previously mentioned, are eligible for the 50% discount. Check Bryce Canyon's website for further details. Backpacking. A backpacking permit is required for all overnight stays in the backcountry. Permits may be purchased at the Visitor Center from 9 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. and 1:30 p.m. to 6 p.m. and can be booked on recreation.gov. Backcountry campsites are limited to 6 people per regular site and 15 people per group site. Backcountry camping is permitted only in designated campsites. No open fires are allowed anywhere in the park outside of Sunset and North campgrounds. There is bear activity within the park, so a bear can is required when spending the night in the backcountry. There are 2 main backpacking trails within Bryce Canyon. First, the Under the Rim Trail, connecting Rainbow Point, the last stop on the scenic drive, to Bryce Point. There are 7 designated campsites on this 22.9-mile trail. With 4,300 feet of elevation gain, you get to experience the solitude of Bryce Canyon's forested backcountry with views of pink-hued cliffs along the base of the Pennsauken Plateau. The second route being the Riggs Spring Loop Trail, with 3 campsites and 8.8 miles round trip with 1,900 feet of elevation gain. The trail starts at Yampava Point along the Bryce Canyon Scenic Drive. Snow may limit your ability to hike in the backcountry during the winter months. There's no guarantee of finding a water source to filter in the backcountry. Carrying a minimum of a gallon per person is recommended. Inside the park, the Bryce Canyon Lodge is going to cost you about $250 plus a night. The biggest issue is availability during peak seasons. Outside the park, there is a number of great options. Personally, I would support Ruby's Inn. They do a tremendous job. You can get all your supplies there. But there's also the Best Western. There's actually a few Best Westerns and a lot more. Feel free to give it a good Google search, but there are a ton of great options. You'll see what I'm talking about both on Airbnb and hotels.com. Roughly, you're going to be paying about $100 to $200 a night. Safety within the park and in the nearby city. Honestly, Bryce Canyon is one of the safest places you can be in. Bryce Canyon City, the national park itself. There's not really a threat of crime or animals. It really is a great spot to take your whole family. Here's a few pieces of gear that I'd recommend if you're either day hiking or backpacking. Osprey makes tremendous backpacks. Highly recommend them. They're great for day packs and backpacking. I personally use a Granite Gear Blaze 60 liter. It's been awesome for me, but it's also a very big pack. I'd also bring a backpack cover so that you can keep your items waterproof. Sleeping bag, I use the REI Magma sleeping bag. I would also bring a sleeping bag liner just to make sure you don't get it too dirty. An inflatable pad, I've been using a Thermarest pad. They're a little pricey, but oh my gosh, you will never sleep better in the backcountry. You'll want an inflatable pillow as well. For water filtration, I always use my platypus. For my bear can, I use the Cache bear can. For cooking food, I'll use my Jetboil. Jetboil's been awesome. I've used it at 14,000 feet, and I've used it doing car camping. It's just a great option all around. Obviously, you want a fuel canister to go with that. Some kind of eating utensil, I usually bring a backpacking spork. One of the best investments you'll ever make backpacking is the Helinox chair. Super tight, compact chair. One of the best choices I've ever made. You want to bring a first aid kit, emergency fire starter. I'll use walking sticks as well. Cascade does a really nice job, and they're very cheap. I'll use knee sleeves, and obviously I like to have my Nalgene water bottle. For electronics, I usually bring a portable charger. Anchor makes really high quality products. Headphones, I just use my Apple AirPods. And again, for my watch, I'll use an Apple Watch as well. For food, I'll use dehydrated meals. Mountain House is always a solid option, but there's many great brands out there. Feel free to go check them out at your local REI. I like dried mango from Costco. They also do a tremendous Korean pork jerky at Costco as well. Blue Diamond Wasabi Almonds are an awesome choice. Pedialyte, great for recovery. Liquid IV is really good for recovery as well. And for caffeine, I usually rely on my Starbucks double shot canned espresso. Clothing, a good pair of hiking boots is a must. Vivo Barefoot makes a really high quality shoe with great toe space so your feet don't feel cramped even when swollen. I like my long sleeve quarter zips. I burn super easy, so this is a great option for making sure my arms are covered, but also something that's very breathable as well. Boonie hat gives you 360 degrees of coverage. Shout out to Tactics Skate Shop and Bryce Wong. I wear my hat every single time I go hiking. Gotta have a pair of shades. I usually wear my Oakleys out there, but anything with a bronze or amber tint to it just really emphasizes the colors. And running shorts, just something very stretchable, breathable, so that your legs don't feel cramped. For toiletries, you gotta have your all-purpose wet wipes just to make sure that you can clean up everything you can. Sunscreen's a must, and bug spray is as well. Natural and geological features. So we've been talking a lot about the hoodoos, but just how are they made? Rain and melting snow erode the edge of this high plateau at a rate of 1 to 4 feet every century. As the rim erodes, harder cap rock layers preserve softer rock below, forming rock walls called fins. Here at 8,000 feet, nightly temperatures fall between freezing half of the year. Snow melt and rain trickle into the cracks and expand as it turns into ice, fracturing the rock and forming holes called windows. The process is called frost wedging. Chemical weathering also occurs as acid and precipitation dissolves the calcium carbonate that holds the rocks together. As the window expands, the cap rock collapses, creating the irregular rock spires called hoodoos. Bryce Canyon has the greatest concentration of hoodoos on Earth. The history of Bryce Canyon National Park. Little is known of the native inhabitants, which lived in the area 10 to 15,000 years ago. It was settled by Mormons in the 1850s. The park is named after Scottish immigrant Ebenezer Bryce, who homesteaded the area in 1874. Other settlers would start calling the place Bryce's Canyon. Eventually, drought and overgrazing led to the abandonment of Bryce Canyon. President Warren G. Harding designated the area as a national monument in 1923. In 1928, it was recognized as a national park. The park is actually not a canyon, but a series of amphitheaters filled with hoodoos. Hoodoos are tall pinnacles that are formed through erosion and cover the landscape. The series of hoodoo-filled amphitheaters cover the park from north to south for 20 miles, the largest of which being Bryce Canyon Amphitheater at 12 miles long, 3 miles wide, and 800 feet deep. In 1931 and 1942, subsequent legislation enlarged the park to its current size. On June 8, 2023, Bryce Canyon celebrated its 100-year anniversary. Thank you everyone for joining in. I plan on doing a review of Angel's Landing in Zion National Park, Lake Louise and the surrounding hikes in Banff National Park, and I would love to get a review of summiting Mount Whitney in the Inyo National Forest. Thank you all for joining, and I'll see you on the next one.